And so we take up the story again on the 29th of April. Wendy was busy building her nest and very near completion. Feathers were starting to come in, and she was going to start laying eggs any day now. But when is that exactly? Well, to be quite honest, that is up for question. She starts doing some sort of nesting behavior on the 1st of May, but we're not actually too sure. So it is around this period. She hides them very well. And we can see she employs some lovely white feathers, and loads of fluffy material starts making their way into the nest this time. And that is all to deter onlookers on spotting eggs in amongst all the other white material. But you can see she's very much located all that white material over those eggs. And over the next few days of egg laying, she goes on overdrive in bringing in nesting material. She makes the place very, very cozy. And blue tits tend to lay an egg every day, generally in the morning, one a day, until their clutch is complete, and then and only then will they start incubating. And you know, incubating has begun when the female blue tit starts sitting on the nest pretty much indefinitely, only popping out for a bit of food, and a lot of time it is the male bringing the food. Her job now is to keep those eggs warm. And this is actually one of those times where we can actually see the eggs now, finally. Confirmation that there are actual eggs in this nest. And blue tits are known to incubate their eggs for 12 to 16 days, but our female blue tit, Wendy, actually took 17 days to incubate until her chicks finally hatched. And so on the 20th of May last year, new life was brought into the world by Wendy. And I suppose Willow helped out a little bit also. But it was Wendy that done all the hard work over the last 17 days, caring and heating these eggs to just the right temperature until we saw a little bit of a beak there. But once Wendy leaves, there we go, a clear image, or a clear enough image of Wendy's first chick. And so we go into the feeding. And this is the most crucial part for these chicks, as if they don't get enough food, very obviously, they will die. And it was all too much for one chick, sadly, and we actually lose one chick straight off the bat on the 22nd, just 2 days later. But Wendy, being a smart mother, decides to take this chick out to protect the other chicks from any disease that a decaying chick may cause in the nest. And so Wendy discards the dead chick. It's sad to see for this chick, but unfortunately in life, and especially in nature, this is just how some of these things go. The weak just don't always survive. And so that means there was 7 chicks remaining, and thankfully the rest of the nesting season goes quite well. Feathers start forming, and you see their pigmentation really starting to come in by the 29th of May here. Pin feathers start to form, and they just keep going from strength to strength. And over the next coming days, the chicks get more and more boisterous and adventurous with their nest box. They start roaming around the nest box, and the competition for food and tussling for the top position really starts intensifying. And as they enter the old man stage, as I like to look at it, they look like grumpy old men. They are also starting to look more and more like blue tits, finally. And Wendy and Willow do not let up with the feeding. The food does not stop coming in. They do an amazing job. So much so that the chicks start fledging, or at least partially fledging, on the 3rd. Now, unfortunately, due to a camera mishap, we'll just stop for a nice little fecal sac footage here. Very good. So as I was saying, footage of the first 3 chicks leaving on the 3rd, between the 3rd and the 4th, was lost. And strangely enough, it wasn't until the 7th that the chicks started thinking about leaving. And this chick pretty much left the nest, but decided, no, not just yet. And back in it goes, which I have never seen happen before. I thought that was just brilliant. But that taste of freedom must have done something to that blue tit, because it was right back up on the hole a few minutes later. And indeed, it does eventually leave the nest. And just like that, out it goes to start its own adventure on its own life. Its brothers and sisters looking a little bit perplexed of what has just happened. I always find blue tits look a little bit confused when one of their siblings fledge. But it must be awful tempting, as Mommy and Daddy are constantly coming in from the outside world with loads of food, and it doesn't take long for them to make that connection and want to go out and try to get closer to Mom and Dad to get that food first. And we see this chick up at the hole now has that exact idea, and it's not long until it decides that it is going to go as well. And then there was only 2. And now this is where things get a little scary. So, chicks have fledged. There are new chicks out in the world outside this nest box. But just look at the chicks' behavior. In a few moments, they're going to hear a noise that they don't quite recognize. So first, we have one of the parents coming into the nest, which is very normal. There's no flinching off the chicks. The chicks know this sound like the back of their wing at this stage, and there is no reaction at all. But just look what happens when they hear something a little foreign. A quick hunker down. A starling trying to predate the nest. But thankfully, the starlings can't get into this nest box. That hole is only big enough for something like a grey tit to get through, and any bird smaller than that. So a starling being much bigger than the grey tits and blue tits, they can't get in. But we saw a good demonstration of their defense mechanism. Get low and stay as still as possible. And you can see they kind of blend in with the bottom of the nest. But thankfully, one of the parents are in to calm everybody down and to lighten the mood with a little bit of food. And surprisingly, even with that scare, it's only going to be a minute or so until these blue tits decide to leave the nest. A nice shot of Wendy and Willow there feeding their remaining 2 chicks in the nest, and they'd also be feeding the chicks outside the nest as well. They continue to feed the chicks after fledging for quite a number of days into the weeks, until they're ready to go at it all on their own. And so this chick decides enough is enough, it's time. And it makes its way up to the nesting hole. And just after a little bit of hesitation, it finally heads on. And this chick is going to fledge in the next minute or 2. And thankfully, it was quite a happy ending. 7 chicks fledged in total in this nest. A huge triumph for Wendy and Willow, and just an amazing feat, really. So it was a good year for the blue tits on this channel. Unfortunately, life just got in the way of me delivering the story last year. But I decided to give it all in one video here for you guys before we start the 2024 nesting season. Now, we don't even know if we're going to get any birds in 2024. It's still early, there's no nesting material in the nest yet, and I will be starting to post some videos on what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. But back to this little chick and its final venture out of the nest box. Its final venture out of its nest box, but as we've said before, it's really only the beginning of this little blue tit's life, and it could be back as soon as next year in a nest box of its own, raising chicks of its own, all in the space of a year. And after sitting up at the nest box for a full minute, it eventually decides to leave. And with that, the 2023 nesting season has come to an end. So will Wendy and Willow be back next year? We know Wendy actually only had 1 foot. I don't know if I got around to actually mentioning that to you guys last year, but there's actually a bit of a backstory to Wendy the blue tit. So, has she been seen in 2024? Will she come back and rear more chicks? Will we even get blue tits? Well, that is all up for debate, and as always with nature, well, to be quite honest, I don't know what's going to happen, but I plan to be able to tell you guys this story, and I very much hope that you guys will join me. Thank you so much for joining in, thank you for your patience, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.